Sanctuary and surveillance. Can any city really be safe? This week on the Laura Flanders Show, I'll talk with Hamid Khan, campaign coordinator for Stop LAPD Spying, about the data mining programs that are proliferating under the Trump administration. And we'll hear from Jeannie Gutierrez about what trans and queer migrants can teach people about protecting the most vulnerable. That's all coming up, as well as a few words from me on hell in Hamburg and how the G20 summit could have been worse. It's all coming up on the Laura Flanders Show, the place where the people who say it can't be done take a back seat to the ones who are doing it. Welcome. Jeannie, Hamid, welcome to the program. Glad to have you. Let's start with you, Jeannie. We don't hear much about what is happening in the trans community. Sometimes we hear the numbers.
Right.
Statistics, like one I heard recently, that the average life expectancy for an African-American trans woman was 35 years old. Is that possible?
Correct. Yeah, that's very sad and unfortunate that we have to deal with those horrible statistics, right? The life expectancy of a Black trans woman, 35. How can we allow that to be, right? As a society, as a community, as a movement. The violence that the transgender woman of color specifically face, it's alarming. In the U.S. alone, last year we lost 26 trans women. Most of the victims were Black trans women.
And trans men?
I believe there's been one or two that have been reported that we know about, but the majority continue to be Black trans women. This year, Laura, we have already, it's only March, and we have 8 trans murders, and 7 of those victims were Black trans women.
Is it possible that the trans men are just not getting reported?
I'm not really sure why that is the case, but it's alarming to me that perhaps they're not being reported as much as the trans woman of color, but it is this horrible situation that I think that transphobia, right, the fact that trans women challenge the binary, the norms, and this dynamic of what it means to be, we challenge the manhood, the womanhood. So that thing that plays also a role in why we, trans women of color especially get murdered at a higher rate.
And what does Familia TQLM do?
Familia Trans Queer Liberation Movement, we are a local and national-based organization. We are building still. We're only 3 years old, specifically working with the Latinx community. We are working in issues of immigrants' rights, LGBTQ rights, and racial justice, because we understand that here there are issues impacting the trans community, including undocumented trans women, but also there are connections with other communities that we need to build solidarity.
So you represent one of those other communities. Hamid, last time we spoke to you, you were talking about the work of your organization, Stop LAPD Spying. It's been about a year. Mm-hmm. How have things changed or not changed since the last time we were in Los Angeles, Hamid?
Well, while the playbook remains the same, I think the enforcement and the operationalization of that playbook is definitely changing. Particularly, I think, post Trump's election, how all these practices are getting much more enhanced, much more severe. And I think speaking about, particularly in the immigrant community, while there's a lot of focus on ICE, the Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement, what's really missing is the much bigger ICE, the information sharing environment, which has been established for over a decade now, post 9/11, and how data collection has really become the major tool for enforcement, for investigation, for tracing and tracking and monitoring people.
Data mining and predictive policing. Hamid Khan of the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition has been telling us what those words really mean. And Jeannie Gutierrez, a community organizer with Familia Trans, has been giving us a sense of how those policies play out up close on people on the receiving end and what they are doing about it in terms of organizing in, for example, Santa Ana, California. I'm Laura. This is the Laura Flanders Show. More to come.
One is never lonely or alone when one is home. Not just house or country or place home. Home like heart home, soul home, home like a tree finds home and roots in fertile soil, home ground. We all just homeward bound like nomads. We all just nomads looking to be rooted in something real, staying, ever traveling to, searching for home by sea, through field, through struggle, in mind. We all just homeward bound, looking to take root in that place, that space, that soil, that home ground. We all just nomads. We all just homeward bound.
That was Soil by Stephen Emmers, featuring Ursula Rooker from the album Home Ground. Please take the time to subscribe to this podcast. If you haven't done it already, go to our website. That's lauraflanders.com. And share the word on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You're listening to The Laura Flanders Show. Next, what does sanctuary really mean for trans migrants living in a city where immigration officers are headquartered in the same facility as the police? Also, Hamid Khan continues on the Trump administration's relationship with all this so-called information sharing. Now, you use the phrase information sharing environment. Mm-hmm. Other people talk about surveillance. Is it the same thing?
It's bringing together surveillance and data collection from various parts. I mean, this came on the heels of 9/11 Commission report. Congress passed a law, the Intelligence Reform Terrorism Prevention Act, and in that, in 2004, they mandated the executive branch to create a massive environment where for various agencies and private contractors and corporations, both local, regional, international, national, would be sharing information about people, where it would be uploaded into various databases, and then the outflow of information would happen.
And how is that intersecting with the immigration agenda of the Trump administration, especially? Not that there wasn't a problem beforehand.
Well, let's look at some of the people that are working with Trump. Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel owns Palantir. Palantir is a data mining firm, which is valued over $25 billion. And Palantir got a contract with the Immigration and Customs Enforcement for about $45 million. But when you look at Palantir itself, first of all, the history of Palantir was that it was developed by a CIA venture capital arm in QTEL. And Palantir has become the primary data analytic engine, if you will, to gather information and develop that into predictive algorithms. So Palantir is being used by ICE. Palantir is being used by LAPD in their suspicious activity reporting program. Palantir is being used in predictive policing. So Palantir is kind of becomes this common thread where information is being shared, information is being collected. So in essence, when they talk about sanctuaries, when they talk about that cities are speaking out and political leadership is speaking out against the partnership between police and immigration, I think what's really missing is that there's a lot of misinformation and misleading information, because immigration doesn't have to wait for a police phone call. They're not waiting for LAPD or the LA Sheriff's Department to pick up the phone and say, hey, we have somebody here. They can go into the information sharing environment and identify anybody and everybody.
So how is this a trans issue? Why are you here sitting next to Hamid here?
Obviously, there is a clear connections with law enforcement and immigrant detention centers throughout the nation. Familia has been involved directly in the campaign to end trans detention here in Santa Ana, California, for the last 2.5 years through different, direct actions. Some of the women who are detained, right, get contact with the police for some type of minor violations, and they get turned over to immigration detention facility. So that's been critical for us to uplift the community, the issues, the struggles that we are facing, and how for many of us, the first contact is through law enforcement, right? And now that the new administration has made it clear that they're going to invest more money on law enforcement, increase the militarization of the border, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, that's why it's critical that for us to be able to say, with the pressure that we are putting, we're forcing ICE to get out of Santa Ana.
Santa Ana was in the news not long ago around this question. How come?
Santa Ana was perhaps the first city to call itself sanctuary, right? But immigration has been holding business in that specific facility for the last 10 years. It's important for us to challenge the notion of sanctuary because, again, we cannot allow a city to call itself sanctuary yet have direct collaborations with ICE. Right? We have a number of LGBTQ undocumented people inside this facility, including undocumented women. Immigration wanted to expand the contract They wanted, because the contract expires in 2020, right? So they wanted to renew it for an additional 10 years, let's say. But by having 2 direct actions, we have forced them to get out. That is the direction that we need to go. If we're really going to embrace fully the term sanctuary, we need to say we need to cut all ties with ICE and put pressure to go further, right, and shut it down completely.
Not so long ago, LGBTQ and immigrants' rights leaders demonstrated outside the Santa Ana Police Department and risked arrest. The voices you are about to hear are those of Zenen Jaimes Perez of Familia Trans and Isa Noyola of El La para Trans Latina.
Today at 8 a.m., trans and queer immigrant activists form a triangular human chain, linked to a metal cage, blocking the intersection at the entrance of the Santa Ana Police Department, to call on the city of Santa Ana to terminate its contract with ICE, which imprisons trans and queer people, detained in inhumane conditions.
So we came here to shut down the county jail here, which has LGBTQ immigrants detained. We had 5 people getting arrested today in a cage and wrapped up in a cage in the middle of the intersection. The police came after about an hour and a half, but we were able to make noise and show the President Obama that it's time to stop deportations. It was a very powerful statement elevating LGBTQ voices and making sure our community was heard.
We're here today to demand the stop in the deportations of our brothers and sisters that are in the trans community and undocumented. We want that to stop now. Our sisters especially are suffering from all this mistreatment and dehumanizing process just to fill a bed quota, and we need to stop it now.
This LGBTQ civil disobedience was led by trans and queer immigrant activists as part of the Not One More deportation campaign. Those risking arrest are directly impacted by deportations.
And we're asking the police to stop the criminalization of all trans and queer communities, our communities that face disproportionate amount of violence, both in the streets and by the police and in the detention centers. And we're asking not one more, and stop the violence and stop the criminalization of queer and trans bodies.
You can see the video of that protest at the Santa Ana Police Department and all of this week's show at lauraflanders.com, or catch our TV broadcasts on Free Speech TV or Link TV. I'll share more syndication information at the end of this podcast. Now back to Geneset Gutierrez, community organizer with Familia Trans Queer Liberation Movement, and Hamid Khan, campaign coordinator of the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. Do you see a model in the struggle around the Santa Ana facility that could be expanded?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think there's so many different ways. I think it's a work in progress, because it's not only about ICE and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, because the way our data is moving, that it is even through social services, it's even through if you're going looking for a home to rent, you may be out somewhere traveling. So I think it's a vast apparatus, the information sharing environment, as I mentioned that earlier. But I think this is definitely a first step towards really dismantling this whole apparatus.
So that whole discussion around whatever they called it, safe communities law, the collaboration between immigration officials and policing, what I'm hearing, it affects trans people disproportionately because you have more run-ins with the police.
Yeah, I mean, the attack that the transgender community is getting, it's alarming. Yeah. Right? We're a small population, yet our numbers are highly represented in the criminal justice system, in the immigrant detention center, and exposing us to further violence that we are facing. So that should be completely unacceptable, and the immigrant rights movement, the LGBT community needs to really center and uplift the leadership of trans women of color specifically.
Are you a documented immigrant?
I'm undocumented at the moment.
And what would be your path to quote-unquote legalization?
It's a very complex, lengthy, pricey process. In my case, my sister has petitioned that they has, because it's a citizen, a sister of, naturalized U.S. citizens, so it's a very long wait that is very lengthy. And if in the process you missed any minor information, your application can be pushed back.
And is it different for trans people?
It's more complex for trans people because no government at the moment at the federal level recognizes our trans identity that I'm aware of, right? So we have to provide or birth-given information that we really don't connect or identify with, that makes it more difficult for us to get through the process without being humiliated, harassed, or dehumanized in doing so.
So if the process wasn't difficult enough for most people, it's even more difficult for you.
I would say so that is the case, and that's why to me it's extremely important to let people know that we are being impacted at a higher rate more than the regular population. And in order for us to truly be free in this society, again, we have to center trans woman leadership.
And how is that changing the work that you're doing, Hamid? This new coalition, kind of, this new expansion of the communities you're working with.
I mean, and just following Janissette's points, I think we have to look at the level of vulnerabilities because it gets very layered. And when you triangulate the tactics and the programs that they have, because now increasingly what we're also seeing is this expansion in real-time facial recognition technology, real-time biometrics technology as well, with the use of body cameras. So body cameras, while people have been speaking about them as like, well, they will result in more officer misconduct, well, more than that, it's going to expand the surveillance state because body cameras are going to be picking up the information. It's almost a 24/7 surveillance tool.
So even if the camera, we had a conversation not so long ago with Eric Adams, the borough president of Brooklyn, and he was talking about cameras as possibly a way to document positive interactions with the community. You're saying even in those positive interactions, data's being captured.
Absolutely, and all the background footage becomes evidence. Then when you look at that, how these See Something, Say Something programs have worked out, now we have evidence based on LAPD's own Inspector General audit that over 80% of these suspicious activity reports have come through this See Something, Say Something, so which comes from private individuals. So they're basically providing a license to profile people. So when you look at transphobia, and how deep transphobia runs, who is a suspect person, what is a suspect body, why would they be called in? Then when you bring in predictive algorithms and you start looking at that, how those algorithms would be used against trans sex workers, for example. So, and who's a suspect in there? So I think it's not only necessary, we are obligated because these are the level of vulnerabilities that we need to expose.
So what kind of activities are you up to? What are you all doing together?
We're really mobilizing, building coalition with other communities, especially the ones that the new administration has openly and heavily attacked, right? The Black community, the Muslim community, the LGBT community. But also in the LGBT community, we need to let them know, hey, there are undocumented LGBTQ people that are also being impacted. That has to be one of the strategic ways for us to move forward. And how do we engage in difficult, uncomfortable conversations? For instance, there's been moments when I'm told, like, oh, I'm undocumented, but I'm not part of the LGBT community. I don't see the connection, so you shouldn't even be part of the, the conversation, much less decision making. So we have to really go hard after our own communities and say, hey, we can no longer be silenced, we can no longer be thrown under the bus. Like, you need to trust the leadership of trans women of color.
And one thing, if I could add, is that I think the other piece that we are doing is that really challenging the movement itself, because I think what is happening is that as people of color, we who are not Black, I mean, all of a sudden there's this mobilization that happens as if the assault started yesterday. I'm originally from Pakistan, but I also challenge the movements in South Asian communities as well because of the failure to draw parallels and to be there when the Black body is being assaulted on the street. I mean, when you look at the assault on the Black body, so I think one of our goals is really to constantly challenge that we need to ground ourselves in Black liberation and really just to challenge our own anti-Blackness.
And if you want to talk about vulnerable bodies, let's talk about women too.
Absolutely.
Surveillance is expanding rapidly and public profiling is on the rise. So how to respond? Hamid Khan of the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition and Jeannie Gutierrez of La Familia Trans note that creating a united front with the most marginalized at the center is key to making change. I'm Laura. This is the Laura Flanders Show. More to come.
When skylights take over the city, while beats getting stronger, so strong, these people sell dust, even lust. Win or lose is the game they play. And here's to east and arms to west, place of
That was Place Delight by Stephen Emmers, featuring Mary Griffin from the album Home Ground. I'm Laura. This is the Laura Flanders Show. You can watch this show or download a podcast for free. Check out our archives at lauraflanders.com. And to keep this podcast ad-free, please consider becoming a sustaining member for as little as just $2 a month. Now, back to sanctuary cities. The whole phrase needs redefining, says Genesette Gutierrez, a community organizer with the Familia Trans Queer Liberation Movement. Meanwhile, Hamid Khan, campaign coordinator with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, says it can become a slippery slope and needs to be framed in a greater context of liberation. What about sanctuary, then, as an answer? It's probably the single most often occurring word in the conversation around resistance to the Trump administration's mass deportation push. Well, we have sanctuary cities. There's a sanctuary movement we need to defend. Sanctuary cities are going to be penalized by the federal government. There's a contention over that now. Right. Are we going down a helpful track here with this talk of sanctuary?
I do welcome the idea of sanctuary cities and municipalities and colleges and universities and spaces for protection, right? But I do believe that it is important to redefine what does sanctuary mean, what does sanctuary look like. We cannot just heavily concentrate on one community while other communities are being heavily attacked. For instance, like the Black community, the Muslim community, the transgender community. So we need to really be more broader in our definition. So when we talk about protection, we mean all people, including those immigrants with criminal records.
And I think just on the flip side to that, I think this whole conversation can become a slippery slope as well. Because sanctuary, as we are reminded by particularly elders in the Black community, is also a containment zone, where you are sort of confined within a certain zone, and if you step out of that zone, your body is in danger. So I think many a times, and while a lot of political haymaking is taking place on both sides, what is happening is that there's not really solid information being shared about how vulnerability is so layered, how information gets shared, how it's not just a matter of seeking sanctuary in a place of worship or in your house, that unless we really are able to move freely around. So I think we have to really just frame this in the bigger conversation of liberation.
We've been working with the people from Equality Labs, Danmori Soundarajan and others, around digital security, trying to make some simple sort of harm reduction strategies accessible to more people. It's hard for me to imagine a harm reduction strategy around what you're talking about. But maybe you have one. And more broadly, how can people listening or watching this respond to a challenge that seems so huge, the way that you're framing it? Because maybe they're attracted to sanctuary cities because at least you can get a handle on that, if you know what I mean.
To me, Laura, what I see, like a city cannot call itself sanctuary when you have, again, for instance, Santa Ana has a city jail that has a section for LGBTQ people, right? That is called the LGBT pod, and some of the people there are undocumented women.
Which prison is this?
In Santa Ana, California.
Santa Ana.
So how can you really call yourself sanctuary when you have this facility here that is collaborating with ICE and holding people in cages and putting them through so many human rights violations? Here we have an opportunity to not only shut down the immigrant detentions part of it, but also the entire city jail, right? And I think instead of having that space to put our people through so much harm and pain, how do we use that space to allow people to be themselves and thrive and be productive people to society and be respected in a very dignified way?
Last word from you, Hamid.
Well, I think ultimately where there's a lot of oppression, there's a long history of resistance as well. And I think that's what we've been doing and lifting, that how do we strengthen this culture of resistance? How do we share knowledge with our communities? How do we learn from the elders who have been fighting this system of oppression for so many years? And I think at the end of the day, it just comes down to that however we look at sanctuary, liberation and freedom really comes along that as communities are building power together. It's about food, it's about shelter, it's about safe streets, it's about access to health care. It's not only about immigration raids.
That was Hamid Khan of the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition with Geneset Gutierrez of La Familia Trans Queer Liberation Movement. For more information on those two organizations and our speakers, go to our website, lauraflanders.com, where you'll find links. I'm Laura. This is the Laura Flanders Show. Coming up, my weekly commentary. I'm just back from Germany, so my F word this week is about hell in Hamburg. The G20 could have been worse. The G20 summit could have gone swimmingly. The tear gas, water cannon, and masses of riot police that met protesters in Hamburg recently cast an unsettling pall over the meeting. But the stated goal of the G20 in Germany was supposed to be shaping an interconnected world. What if they had? Money media love to tell history as if it were a soap opera, and in this season they are reporting endlessly on the supposed clash between Donald Trump and Angela Merkel. In the real world, that boils down to a choice between bullying by a macho, spoiled boy brat or Merkel's faux, market-driven kind of bullying. 99.99999% of the world have no dog in that fight, and even less interest in those two bullies interconnecting. Want European-U.S. unity? Reporters on the G20 should have asked the Lampedusa refugees what they think. They've been languishing in Hamburg since the U.S. and NATO bombed Libya. Their country destroyed, hundreds of them were forced to flee, first to Italy, then to Germany, where they've been told to find work but denied the permits to do any such thing. So much for Atlantic interconnection. So much for a European Union. I was in Hamburg for a night just ahead of the G20 meeting, and one organizer explained pretty convincingly that the main reason Hamburg was picked for the summit was to pay the populace back for voting against Angela Merkel's bid to have them host the Olympics. In a grand swipe against free speech, almost the entire city was declared a protest-free zone. Still, hundreds of thousands of protesters showed up anyway. The night I was there, 3 divisions of the Berlin police had to be sent home for indecency. Brought in to enforce order, they'd actually been spotted pissing in public and having sex against a fence. One was even seen dancing on a table nude, except for a dressing gown and his government-issued pistol. Hamburg's famously libertine spirit was clearly enough to seduce the Berlin cops. But even this fun-loving port city rejected Don Trump. He and his entourage were forced to stay in the boondocks because no hotel was supposedly available. Meanwhile, what's arguably Europe's longest-lived squat, the Rota Flora, an anti-capitalist space that served as a convergence center during the G8 summit in 2007, was doing the same thing again, a decade later. The smoke and violence are shameful. Still, there wouldn't be so much of it if Trump, Merkel, and the rest were a bit more popular. That they are world leaders without real followers is pretty obvious, and made more obvious this week in Hamburg by the G20. The people who need to shape an interconnected world now are that 99.999%, and they need to get at it. Thanks for listening. You can watch these interviews and see video exclusives, as well as find years of archives at lauraflanders.com. The show's produced in New York and syndicated nationally. You can catch us on Free Speech TV and Link TV, as well as streaming online in audio and video. Like what you're hearing? What about what you're not hearing, like advertising? Put your money where your media is and support ad-free independent podcasts like this one. To help us out, go to lauraflanders.com/membership and help us spread the word. We don't have lobbyists or costly PR firms. We have you. So share this podcast with your friends and write us a review on iTunes or wherever it is you get your podcasts. You can write to me, tell me what you think. I'm Laura, Laura, at lauraflanders.com.